I just
not yet.
clicked the button. I just
Not
clicked
yet.
the button. No, I just started it right this minute.
Oh,
So yes, so people should know that we are recording this, and hopefully that's okay with everybody. And if you don't want to be in the video, you can always turn your picture off, but we do like to see your faces.
Okay, you should let us know before you start generally, so we can be ready for it. But hello, everybody. We're going to start. We're waiting a few minutes for everybody to get on. We'll probably get started about 5 after. Sandra, I'm waiting for the sponsors.
Okay.
Sandra.
Yes.
Sandra, as co-chair, why don't you just welcome and thank all the sponsors?
Okay. Oh, okay. Just
So-
let me know when you'd like for me to do it.
Okay. There's Anita Williams. I haven't seen her in 100 years. And she just went blank.
No, I'm still here. Hi, Walter. Just
How
been a
are
little ill, but recovering.
Yes, you're recovering. You're
Hi,
okay?
Anita.
Hi.
Hi, Lenise.
Christian Peoples. Okay.
Hi, Gay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Anita.
Hi.
Anita, Boapa sister.
Yes, the original.
Yes.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So Sandra, were you going to read the names of the co-sponsors of today's event?
Yes.
Why don't we start with the program now, and we'll wait until Barbara Lee comes on and then we'll get started with her presentation and our questions for her. But Sandra, I am Walter Riley.
I'm Sandra J. Johnson. We're both co-chairs for John Joyce Democratic Club. On behalf of John Joyce Democratic Club, we want to welcome all of you for taking time out of your nice Sunday rainy afternoon to be with us. First of all, we'd like to thank our co-sponsors. We are pleased to announce that our co-sponsors are Black Women Organized for Political Action,
Yeah.
Metropolitan Greater Oakland Democratic Club,
Yeah.
Niagara Movement Democratic Club,
Yes.
Oakland East Bay Democratic Club. All right, Wellstone Democratic Club. We thank you so much for being a co-sponsor for this particular event. And we want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. We're gonna have some treats for you, and you're gonna enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I think all the folks who are co-sponsors from their clubs waved their hands. If you didn't, do it again. Congresswoman Barbara Lee is on. And we want to certainly welcome everybody here today as we get started. We have some questions that we will ask both of our speakers, Congressperson Barbara Lee and Regina Jackson. At the end, they'll make some presentation to us. Folks who have questions, put them in the chat. We don't guarantee we'll get to them, but we will at least recognize them and try to get to them. At this point, we are going to start with Congresswoman Barbara Lee. I intended to say Congressperson, and I've been intending to say that every time I introduce you, Congressperson Lee, but old habits. Everybody is, you're looking wonderful here in this period of trying times for all of us. And in this day when we are 100 or so days into this new administration, we're hoping you to shed some light on where things are going, where you are going, and we'll all be better informed about what kind of political work we need to do after this conversation. Congressperson Lee, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Walter. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so glad to be with you for a few minutes. And let me just give a special shout out to Anita Williams. And hi, Anita. I'm really glad to see you, girl.
Okay, all right.
We're in touch with each other, but I never get a chance to see her. You know, Anita's like my sister. I've known Anita since the beginning of time, and I love you and miss you. But these are really some trying times. We thought 2020 was rough. 2021 is in terms of just the Congress, very challenging for a lot of reasons, but there are glimmers of light and glimmers of hope that I see. And I just want to thank the John George Democratic Club and all of you who are on today, because I just want you to know this is still the most enlightened and most progressive district in the country. And what I see in Congress is much of what we've been championing for the last 30 years. And so this is a marathon, as our beloved Ron Dellums reminded us. Change doesn't happen overnight, but we have to stay the progressive course. And in doing that, you begin to see these glimmers of hope and glimmers of light. John George, as you know, was a dear friend to myself and to all of us. He was the one, and I always like to share this story, that he was the one who really encouraged me to run for public office. And I had never thought about running. And John met with me and two other African-American women over a course of 3 months. And he said, "I'm one of you all have to do this." And of course, not me, and the other two, not I. So what happened was John kept calling me. And he said, "We have to have a Black woman, and we have to have a progressive Black woman in the assembly." And I said, "Well, there are plenty in this district." And he kept on calling me. And the last time I saw John was, I believe, on a Friday or a Saturday. It was a gloomy, rainy day, and he was crossing the street on, I think it was Webster. And he stopped me as I was driving, and he shook his finger at me. He says, "You have got to run for the assembly. Now, I'm telling you, you must do it." And the next day, John passed away. Okay. And that was really a defining moment for myself in terms of making this decision. But also, John was such a close friend and mentor until I felt like I had to do this. And that's literally what happened and how I ended up running for the California legislature. And 23 years later, I've been in Congress since '98 now. And so here I am with carrying John George's hopefully torch in the House of Representatives. But I say they're a glimmer of hopes for a variety of reasons. First of all, we see the COVID pandemic and the terrible, devastating impact it's had, especially on our seniors, on Black and Brown communities, on low-income communities, on poor families, on children. It's been awful. And with President Biden, he said that he was going to take this on with a vengeance, and he has. And so we see now that with the bumps in the road, the vaccines are still doing their job. We still need more. We need more contact tracing. We need more messaging, because people are still very reluctant for obvious reasons. We know the systemic and historical racism in the healthcare system, but access is also an issue. We got the FEMA vaccination center at the Coliseum. And let me tell you, we thought this was the site where low-income Black and Brown people, AAPI, members of my community, the Latino community, the African-American community, low-income people could go to get their vaccines. For the first 3 months, 40% were white people from other parts of the county. I mean, other parts of the Bay Area who had access in other areas, not, who should not have done this. So we had to really deal with that very quickly. So we're still ironing out a lot of bumps in the road in terms of the access issue. But again, we see more people getting vaccinated. And we see if we continue to mask, social distance, physical distance, do what the health protocols require, we'll get through this. It's hard because not everyone believes that I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper. So we have a lot of people who just don't give a darn if they won't mask. And I've been on many planes, and let me tell you, airports, even though it's required, boy, it's rough. Some states, it's unbelievable what's taking place. And so unless we do this together, I don't know when this is going to be back to, I won't say back to normal, but back to a place where we can congregate and halfway behave in a way that we did before. So we have to, and I'm just asking you all to continue to do what is required so that my county and our Bay Area at least will be ahead of the curve. So there's a glimmer of hope there. With regard to the infrastructure bill, you know, we're trying to have one bill, and we're trying to make sure it's human infrastructure also, because we need to have our childcare workers. They need to be protected. They need to be able to unionize. They need a $15 plus minimum wage with benefits. They need to be treated as if they're essential, because they are our caregivers, child care workers, all of the people who we rely on to keep our communities going. They're essential. They deserve to be treated with integrity, with dignity, and with fairness. So that's going to be part of this infrastructure bill, unless the Republicans just, you know, unless we cave to some of what they want, which we're pushing back and saying, do not do that, because we have to have one bill with the human infrastructure piece in it also. Access to broadband, you know, with distant learning, half of my district, the kids are way behind because they didn't have access to broadband. Now, can you imagine in the golden state of California, half of the district's kids couldn't go online to continue with their education because they didn't have access to technology. That's a shame and disgrace. A couple of points in the prior bill and the rescue package, we did extend the child tax credit. Yes, 50% of children who are living in poverty will now be lifted out of poverty, but we've got to make it permanent. And so we're trying to do that. You know, I chair the task force, the Leaders Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity. And I've been working on issues around poverty forever, you know, since I worked for Ron. But you didn't hear Democrats until recently talking about the poor, the most vulnerable, low-income people. And I've just been beating that drum for day in and day out. And so now you see and you hear more Democrats talking about not only fighting for the middle class, but also for low-income people, for poor people, for low-income people, for people who need opportunity and a pathway out of poverty. But it's been a heavy lift. Let me tell you, because Democrats, again, my district aside, because you all understand what the issues around poverty are, but a lot of our Democratic caucus members just dodged it for years and wouldn't talk about it. Now they see why, because their constituents also during this pandemic are in food lines and need health care. They need their Medicaid. They need, what they used to call a handout. They need help. They need a helping hand. And so now I think it's unfortunate because this virus has killed and infected so many people that now more members and more elected officials are understanding why we have to address poverty, because now they're feeling it in their districts also. Finally, I'll just say, I'm pushing to make sure that Biden continues with withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. And I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this from day one, because they could be there another 20 years and the same arguments will prevail in terms of leaving the country unsecured. $5, $6, $7 trillion we've spent. Large percentage of that money has been spent on training Afghan security forces, hundreds of thousands of Afghans, okay? And so we're not going to leave them exposed. We're going to make sure, and I chair the first time a Black woman or an African-American has chaired the subcommittee on appropriations that deals with diplomacy and diplomatic initiatives. So I chair, it's called the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee. Everything that's non-defense I have, so diplomacy, development. And so I'm going to make sure that women are protected in Afghanistan, that we have the resources to continue with what gains that women have made, and to make sure that they're at the table with the Taliban as they talk through these peace talks, and that their education and all of the gender equity issues, all the issues around children. I've got in my budget for the first time in I don't know how long, but this is the first year I'm chairing a 12% increase. Still not enough because defense is off the scale. But what I'm trying to do is get the administration and the House and the Senate, of course, to understand that this balance between diplomacy, the three stools of our foreign policy, diplomacy, development, and defense are out of balance. They're out of whack. And you all know that more than most in the country. 750 billion into defense. Come on, please. So we have to rebalance that. So if we can't cut defense, which I'm trying to do by 10%, Mark Pocan and myself in the Progressive Caucus, then at least give us more money in the development and the diplomacy accounts for global health, for development assistance, for humanitarian assistance, for all of the diplomatic and development work and funding that we need to try to begin to rebalance our foreign policy. So I'll stop there now. There's so much going on. But like I said, you know, as challenging as times are, there are these little, you know, glimmers of hope that we're working on to try to make them more, to make them brighter and to push through some of these issues that we must do as a country, because otherwise we're on the brink. I was sitting there on January 6th, right there on the floor when the white supremacists, domestic terrorists, and all those came to try to attempt overthrow of the government, a coup. I was right there. Some of you have heard my story, but it was a harrowing experience. So I have joined the lawsuit against the Proud Boys, against Donald Trump, against Giuliani, against all of them who conspired to try to overthrow the government and who really tried to take us down. And so, you know, it's a lot going on, but I love all of you for staying with me and helping me and giving me your input, your ideas, your support, and your friendship. And it means a heck of a lot to me. So thank you all again.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can stay with us for a few more minutes. I didn't know you were on this committee, and so I hadn't submitted a question regarding that, given that. But areas of concern for all of us here in the Bay Area, obviously, is around what's happening with criminal justice reform, judicial reform, the anti-racist movement that needs to take place in Congress. The other thing is, on your committee, you have the ability overseeing some of the stuff that's happening in Haiti, and Pierre's on the line and he's taking notes.
Okay, good. Hi, Pierre. Good.
What are your thoughts about how we might proceed in trying to move things around Haiti at this point?
Okay, I'd like to talk to you, Pierre, about this because Haiti, darn near, I hate to say a failed state, but the elections are a problem. The money's not getting, they're going to all these European NGOs. I'm not sure where, and we keep appropriating money, and I'm gonna keep doing that for my subcommittee, USAID, I mean, the virus, the vaccines, all the humanitarian assistance we have to keep doing. But on the political front, we need to kind of figure out what the US's proper role is in that, because I don't know if you're hearing that elections are gonna take place, but it's pretty dicey right now, as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm not sure where we go with Haiti other than right now making sure, you know, I've always supported what we call it a Haitian Marshall Plan, because we know the US is complicit in what has taken place with Haiti over the years in terms of the destabilization, in terms of the whole effort to, well, what happened with President Aristide. So we know all the reasons for what is taking place, but we got to figure out how the US can help get out of this. And I really, on the political front, have no idea what we need to do other than insist on fair and free elections. But we're even, as I go around, and I've been to Haiti and observed elections before, it's very little credibility we can put forth in any country about fair and free elections right now, but we have to keep trying. So I'd like to just talk with you, Pierre, and figure out what you think for my subcommittee we need to do in addition to the resources for humanitarian assistance.
Can I be in that conversation?
Congresswoman, and thank you. Yes, that will be great. We'll have to discuss that.
Okay.
And on the judicial reform, There's a discussion about filibuster. One of the questions that was proposed for asking judicial reform and issues of what's happening around racism and police reform movement.
Well, I think we should end the filibuster. I mean, that's the bottom line. If I were in the Senate, I'd be working on that day and night, but I just think, and we're pushing the Senate to do that because look, Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a bold agenda and get it done. But we have a Senate that's very fragile in terms of the number, in terms of Democrats. And so I truly believe that Schumer and Biden are trying to figure this out, but I think we ultimately have to end the filibuster. And that's the only way we're going to get anything done. And on criminal justice reform, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, I talked to Karen today. They're moving forward to try to establish formal negotiations now. You know, some of the big dangers are the qualified immunity and some of the real, the substance of it, the Republicans may try to water down and make it a bill that does much of nothing. And so I think that the negotiations, they're going pretty well, the informal negotiations, but the national database, for example, you have to have that so that we know a police officer's record. Has this person, you know, been abusive in the past? And, you know, they move from city to city, state to state. So that's really important. Qualified immunity. No one's above the law. They should be able to, they should be able to be sued as well as to be prosecuted. And so I think what happened with the trial of Chauvin and all, you know, was, I'd say it was a step toward accountability. It wasn't, which is a step toward justice, but in no way that should have been the norm. That's, you know, this was an aberration. This was like, yeah, this should have been for decades how, you know, a police officer is held accountable. And here we are, we have just one moment of a small victory. And so we have to understand that and have to keep moving forward with criminal justice reform and judicial reform, because I believe in, and I think I'm on the bill, I'm sure I'm on the bill to look at how we expand the Supreme Court, because this whole criminal justice system has got to be, in many ways, we've got to dismantle a lot of the systemic racism that's in it and build on that, which leads me to just the whole issue of racism. And thank goodness our young people are still in the streets, and many people, young, old, middle-aged, calling for justice. And it's not going to stop, because it's going to be the street heat that's going to bring around anything significant in this country. I'm working with Senator Warren now on the healthcare space, and we got CDC to declare, you may have heard, that racism is a public health issue. Well, Senator Warren and we've been doing this, and Ayanna Pressley, for a year now. And we have legislation to do that, to set up a department and an agency within within HHS and CDC to begin to look at police misconduct as a public health issue, and how you address healthcare, knowing and recognizing that racism is at the core of it. And so we have to dismantle that and build a healthcare system that is equal and provides for good quality healthcare, so we don't have Black and brown people dying disproportionately from a virus or from any disease that we know the underlying issues that give rise to why we die earlier. And so there's just so much, and being on the Appropriations Committee, what I'm doing is, because I have a chance to weigh in with every agency on every funding bill we have, to write into each one an issue around racial equity and racial justice, and how we want to see resources used, for instance, at the Department of Education, to dismantle any systems and disrupt any systems that we find are racist systems for our children, and build an educational system that's a quality education system that's equal. And to think we still have to do that here in 2021 is crazy. It shows you, though, we haven't dealt with the issues of 401 years ago in terms of slavery in the Middle Passage. And so I'll just say, my Truth Commission, Truth, Racial Healing, Transformation, HR 19, it's got to get done. 40 countries in this world have had these truth commissions. We've never done that in America. So many of my constituents didn't understand why we saw Black and brown people dying disproportionately from COVID. I had to explain, this is a result of the Middle Passage and 250 some years of slavery, and then Jim Crow and Black codes and lynchings and mass incarceration. And so we have to have this truth-telling moment, and we have to have reparations. And I sat in the hearing, the markup in committee. John Conyers, God bless his soul, he did HR 40 starting in 1989. I think Ron was one of the first co-sponsors, and that was one of the first bills I co-sponsored for a commission to study and develop reparations. So we got that through the committee. Now it's got to get to the floor, but we need more support. We have probably about 160 or 70 co-sponsors. You know, it's going to take 218 on the floor to pass it. So we need all of your help to work with your friends and organizations and your allies across the country to tell them to support HR 40 and HR 19, because those go to the root causes and how you fix the root causes of systemic and structural racism and white supremacy, which is alive and well in America.
One other question that we had is, we have a couple others that maybe we might get to, but what are the prospects for voting rights legislation? It's one of the issues that we in John George have been paying and watching very closely.
Yeah, well, it's filibuster. If we can't get them to go for it, I mean, Manchin and Sinema, they have to, I mean, if one issue they should vote for, if not, we should figure a way out around dismantling the filibuster. We have to figure out is voting rights. We passed HR 1, you know, For the People Act, which deals with campaign finance reform, democratizing elections, the whole 9 yards. But HR 4, we've got to pass, and that's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And that hasn't come to the floor yet. It probably will this summer. But HR 1 is over in the Senate now, and we're trying to figure out how to get that to Biden's desk. And then following that soon, quickly, would be HR 4. So it's the filibuster issue. Once we get the votes in the House, which is very fragile, mind you, we only have a few vote margin. And, you know, some of our Democrats, their districts are Trump-like, and they kind of hold back on some of the issues that should be a no-brainer. But voting rights is one, and I think we'll get most of the Democrats in the House on it, but it's the filibuster in the Senate. So that's, you know, we got to get rid of the filibuster, or they've got to find a way around it for voting rights.
How long are you going to be able to stay here?
I can have, wait a minute, hold on a minute, because you know, this is like, I have about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Questions in the chat here. I have one from Kitty. Are you aware of the right-wing laws being passed in France, which are taking away freedom of speech, dress, and religion from Muslims? I've just read about it, heard about it. I haven't talked to many people about it though, but it's outrageous. And this is another way that the right wing is on a move in the world. I mean, this is not just a US issue. I was in Germany a couple of years ago and same thing. Steve Bannon, you know, the far right, they're on a move. This is a worldwide movement. And, you know, I don't know how best to, other than we need to weigh in with the groups and form alliances with people in the streets protesting this from the US. That's what we have to do to help the people beat back some of these laws. Like we need a lot of help to beat back a lot of ours. Other folks with questions, Howard Ergeman, it's a question regarding the high rate of infections in East Oakland. I think we've been dealing with that in the local area where people are kind of concentrating on these zip codes where there's a high incident of infections from COVID, and responses to that are being developed in the area. But your thoughts about it?
Well, you know, in all of the bills it's been myself with the Tri-Caucus putting in direction where there's federal funding, that this funding has got to get down to communities of color and low-income communities and communities where the pandemic is disproportionately impacting people. So we should have the money. And also, and I wrote this in, and I have the COVID Community Care Act, which we took portions of that, put it into this last bill and the bill prior to that. And Senator Warren helped us in the Senate, where we direct the states to send this money for communities to use through nonprofits, community health centers, faith-based groups to test, do contact tracing, and for vaccines, and for trusted messengers. And so given the more access than hesitancy, well, some say it's hesitancy, it's probably a little bit of both, but there is money there to hire people to do this. But I think what we have to do also is how we're dealing with this. We're starting, the Black Caucus is starting, we're going to kick it off, I think May 1st, get our GOTV effort, get out the vaccine effort, because we have to do phone banks into our communities. We can't, and I was out, again, the FEMA site, they were having people go online to make appointments. Well, a lot of people don't have access to broadband. A lot of people who need the vaccine can't go online. So you've got to have a phone number where they can call. So we're going to set up phone banks, do it, go door to door, you know, mobile health units. So we're starting, like I say, the CDC is leading us all, 50 of us now, I guess, or no, they're more than 50, they're 60 of us. We're going to be kicking that off, our GOTV effort. So we'll be in East Oakland, we'll be all over Oakland, everywhere where we need to get the word out, and do it in a campaign mode, a grassroots mode, so that people know that they have trusted messengers and people who care about them, who are going to help them get the vaccine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your staff is saying that you got to go and you need to be some other place as
Yeah,
always.
they're pretty good, boy. My staff is phenomenal. Let me tell you, they're 24/7, not on behalf of me, but on behalf of my constituents. So I have to thank them all for that. And I hear from all of you all the time. Just know that individually, which is great.
Well, we thank you for being here, and we're going to follow up with the discussion about Haiti.
Yeah, let's do that. It really is good to see everybody. And please stay woke, stay masked, physical distance, you know, and do everything that we should do until we get out of this, and we will. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, transitioning. Regina is on the line, I hope.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. There you are. All right. Thank you for being here. We're going to give you some minutes up front to say some of the things that are so important to you, and we have a few questions for you.
Okay, perfect. I do believe that I am speaking primarily in my capacity as chair of the Oakland Police Commission. So I will.
I want you to speak in your capacity as a hell fighter from Oakland and chair of the committee.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. Oftentimes, because I've been doing the other job so long, people are very focused on the police commission. So yes, as president of the East Oakland Youth Development Center, I am acutely aware of the tragedies and the full-on despair that is going on in Oakland, but specifically Deep East Oakland. You may or may not be aware that just in the last 2 weeks, there have been considerable actions, primarily against youth centers, that have been vulnerable to arson, including our center. Our center was lit on fire. Fortunately, we were able to minimize the damage based upon the quick response of the Oakland Fire Department. But the Junior Center of Arts and Science down at Lake Merritt, the Vietnamese Community Center, there have been like 3 or 4 efforts at Mosswood Park. So I just want to loop that in with obviously the rising and disproportionate number of homicides in Deep East Oakland. You know, so appreciative to be able to hear some of Congresswoman Lee's remarks, because the whole Trusted Voices campaign around COVID, and quite frankly, just around the pandemic and just holding on, has been an effort that I've been a part of through the Black Cultural Zone and through Alameda County's Mask Up campaign and the Brotherhood of Elders campaigns. So, you know, we're working on all axes to try and inform and protect the public. And, you know, her points about being disconnected from the technological perspective, being distrustful of the vaccine, and oh my God, what has happened with the vaccine situation? You know, you get 1 or 2 shots, and now they're saying you might have to have a 3rd, and then you may have to have an annual one. Nobody African American, let alone disenfranchised, is rushing toward this as a resolution to the problem. But because of how disenfranchised our African American populations are, who are, not working or unable to support their children as it relates to schooling. I mean, just all of these circumstances keep us in a place of despair. And because we're not able to collect together, we're also not able to kind of move the train, in one movement. You have protests hither and yon, but you just don't know where everybody is and who's sitting on what kind of foundation. So with that, I do want to transition a little bit into what we're doing from a police commission perspective to try and protect the people of Oakland, and particularly the most disenfranchised. The police commission was set up in 2017. I'm one of two people that was selected for a 4-year term, and I'm in that 4th year. I am in my 3rd year of serving as the chair. And what I'd like to say is that the commission has managed to, through policy, really prioritize de-escalation and preservation of life as the most important protocols and policies and procedures for the Oakland Police Department to execute. We have done some exceptional policies just in the first couple of years on parole and probation, so that there are no more warrantless searches, and the disproportionate attention that has gone to African Americans, primarily through racial profiling, also gets reduced with that policy in place. Our use of force, which is a huge, it's like an encyclopedia. So we have to kind of go through and now identify more specific components of it. But again, that's where we have focused on de-escalation and the preservation of life. And back in 2018, I served on the discipline committee for the Pollock case, which was a white young man who may have been mentally ill, may have been on drugs, but who was killed by the police. And he was armed yet unresponsive. And we had several cases before the commission was stood up, where people were killed in their cars just for having a gun out. And so we have resisted through policy the ability to continue to do that. But just like Congresswoman Lee talks about this qualified immunity, our system is so broken, and it's been broken on the backs of African Americans, that what we're talking about now is an entire shift of how things are going in terms of police reform. And fortunately for us in Oakland, we would not, according to our policies and protocols, we would not chase somebody down a back alley like the officer did when he shot the 13-year-old. There are certain things that we just don't chase after folks anymore. We try to keep it very specific to managing crime. But we have the carotid hold that is no longer able to be done. The militarized equipment policy that basically says that we're going to get rid of Bearcats. It's going to take a minute because we've got to replace it with something that works better. But I'm also looking at the reimagining police public safety, and the recent recommendations that came out of that were exceptional. We're actually going to get some funding so that all of these commissioners who have full-time jobs can actually be supported by more than an administrative assistant, which is primarily the only staff that we have. The Community Police Review Agency, which is doing an excellent job increasing their sustained accounts and all, is getting more staff too. And we may be looking at shifting investigations from the police department over to the Community Police Review Agency. I know that you all have questions for me, so I think maybe I will tell you that we're very pleased with the hiring of Chief LaRon Armstrong. We have a variety of ad hocs on white supremacy, missing persons, the search for the Inspector General. So we've got a lot of work that's ahead of us. but we think we're going in a good direction. And we're focusing on hiring staffing that's going to be more reflective of those who are most affected, which is African Americans. I'd like to thank Gay Cobb for inviting me to speak, as well as her work and so many citizens' commitments on the selection committee, because I know that that's a challenging job. And then I'll pause there. I'm sorry. I could go on.
Gay is going to ask
Yeah.
some questions.
Okay.
I will. Hey, Regina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think everybody knows that, or should know that the Oakland Police Commission is one of the strongest citizen commissions in the country. And much credit is due to Oakland voters that passed Measure LL and then amended it to make it even stronger. So thank Oakland voters for that. So Regina, you've actually already addressed some of the questions we had for you, but I want to see if you can make some more comments on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, which has been a very sort of broad-based and sweeping and intense effort over the last couple of months. Are there specific recommendations that you would advocate that the commission undertake and implement?
Yes, and I will say that I am not able to go down the list. There is such a litany of recommendations. My hat is off to all of the citizens that worked so hard to get those out. The first and one of the most important is to get us some support. The recommendations to increase our staffing is critical. We can only do as much as, the 24-hour day allows, especially if we have regular jobs to address. We are looking at least perhaps a disproportionate number of the internal investigations being moved over to the Community Police Review Agency. I am still talking to folks across the country whose commissions have investigations as a part of their responsibility to see what the gaps and the challenges are. We actually took the recommendation on the Bearcat. I know they wanted to have it be more sweeping and more quick, but unfortunately things move slow as snails with the city of Oakland. And I wish that there were more efficiencies inside the disciplines to facilitate, turnaround of contracts and execution of contracts and actual work getting done. I believe there are a litany of recommendations, but unfortunately, I have not been able to read through all of them. And so those are probably the top ones that are most impactful to the commission now. And we'll be looking to see how City Council decides to support those. Macro is another huge one. And I can't tell you how happy I am. And I should say that the Coalition for Police Accountability did the lion's share of work trying to help get Measure LL in. And then when the city decided that we really did not have the powers that Measure LL gave us, then we had to go back to the ballot for Measure S1. I will say that while we really appreciated more than 80% of the citizens voting not once but twice, that the city resistance for facilitating the police commission's existence was quite shocking. And in some instances, it continues. I mentioned that we recommended the firing of 5 officers during the Pollock investigation. And most recently in our last commission meeting, it was identified that the city invested $160,000 with a firm that has hired former police chief Howard Jordan and 2 other City of Oakland people to do a full-on investigation that was supposed to eclipse the police commission's discipline committee recommendation, which is supposed to be final. And yet there is still another step before we know if they will continue to be fired. So this, these qualified immunity situations, it really is pretty heinous. And so I'm hoping that in 2024, when the police Bill of Rights comes back up, that there will be significant movement away from that.
Could I ask you a question to follow up there? You say the city has resisted, and we know that there's been resistance, so forth, but could you tell us more specifically what that means? Because the city is the city hall, it's the city is all kinds of things, but who? As a political group, we need to understand more specifically.
Certainly. Well, it has been primarily the former city administrator. The new city administrator has not been on very long. Certainly the city auditor, and to some degree, even the mayor. And I think that it has to do with the fact that before we even got seated, there was like this patent place of how we were going to come in and be the devil reincarnate without any, professional acumen or anything. And so literally we had one half-time staffer who would have been the equivalent of a low-level administrative assistant. And we ended up having to, hodgepodge some stuff to get a middle road administrative assistant. But even that person couldn't attend our meetings. And we were like, why would you give us someone that cannot serve us the way we need to be served? Then you had the hit piece done by the city auditor. You have her having audited the police department and praising them years ago for their almost completion of things, where we were judged for having meetings that go too long, for not being able to address our, principal responsibilities because we didn't have staff, but then we were held responsible for not having staff. But most recently, like I said, when we talk about the step 3 in the Pollock case, in terms of the city administrator signed off on that $160,000 investigation that served no purpose, that they did not have to do. They did not tell us, they didn't tell the mayor, they didn't tell the federal monitor. And so literally, if you go back to our commission meeting this past Thursday, we grilled the HR director because there was no reason for it. And if the city had recognized the commission's position as their position, which is what they should have done according to Measure S1, then we wouldn't be in this situation. We had the city attorney's office. Oh my goodness, I forgot to mention them. So them declaring that we did not have a right to our own legal defense, that we did not have a right to hire and supervise the inspector general. We literally had to go back to the voters to clarify that right, in no uncertain terms, so that we could in fact do what the citizens really gave us the power to do back then. To Gay's point, yes, we are arguably the strongest commission in the country. We have the ability to fire the police chief, and we exercised that right last year. And we were thoroughly thrown under the bus, even though we fired we led the firing, but we invited the mayor to join us in a not-for-cause termination. And, not for cause made most sense, rather than going down the litany of reasons, right? But, we were hailed as ridiculous. And of course, the pandemic has not done a whole lot to keep the, the homicide rate down, but that is the pandemic's fault, quite frankly, all the circumstances that come around it, and not something that I believe the police can do some prevention work, but if they don't know where the actions are occurring, they can't stop them. They can only kind of be responsive to them. Having said that, we've got this social media investigation where, members of the Oakland Police Department were liking either former terminated police officer statements around the terror on January 6th. And so trying to figure out where the underlying white supremacy exists in order to root it out, because there continues to be perhaps a less toxic culture than maybe Minnesota or other places, but we still have some toxicity in the culture and we have to root it out. We are in the midst of an investigation to follow up the Oakland Black police officers' claims that, which have been affirmed, that, they are disciplined at a higher rate. They are more slowly moved in probation, in promotions. And if you look at Black officers inside the blue being mistreated, that gives you some indices as to how citizens get mistreated. So we have a long way in terms of managing that, but we're putting it, front and center in terms of having the conversations. We're trying to look at the data, and we're trying to identify how we do a culture shift.
Right. Regina, I believe the former chief has now sued the city for wrongful termination. Has that case been adjudicated yet?
No, I know that the city has resisted it, but there's, several layers to it. And our most recent communication has been to identify if we have any, personal emails or texts that include any of that discussion. That is not something that we are currently involved in. We have moved on. I am hoping that we will, that there will not be any findings as to, wrongful termination, because there's certainly quite a number of reasons to have terminated, even if we did not identify them. We didn't have to because it was a no cause termination.
Right, right. I also, related to some of your earlier discussion, I wanted to ask whether the commission has made progress in having access or autonomy with respect to access to police files. I know that's been a thorny issue, and has the recent ballot measure made any difference in that regard?
It is at a snail's pace. There are certain things that we should be able to look at, in terms of SB 1421, but as it relates to the commissioners specifically getting access, as opposed to maybe our counsel who can advise us, we have not been privy. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Walter, do you want to follow on?
I have one other question that you talked about, somewhat investigating, trying to find out what's happening in the police department in terms of their liking some of the right-wing anti-Black activities that is going on in the country in general. And the response of the Oakland Police Department is part of the same response that occurred across the country, to attack everybody who dared to criticize it, and attack violently. And they were the primary promoters of the violence. I think some of that, you found that, and it would be nice to just say that to the public from your investigation after the demonstrations last year. They initiated the violence. They were in solidarity with the violence across the country. And it's like we can expect any day now police departments across the country to show their distaste for the Chauvin verdict of finding guilty and start killing at a higher rate, which happened last year anyhow after the demonstrations. Your comments and your thoughts about that, and some of the sort of the mindset that might be something that you're thinking here. We had a photograph exposed of a Oakland police officer in a Boogaloo Boys shirt. And yeah. I don't know that any follow-up has occurred on that. They like to say that they are all clean. I just wonder what kind of conversations you're having with those folks. Is your conversation with the chief at arm's distance? Is your conversation with the chief one of buddy, we are in this thing together?
So thank you for raising that. I know that you are aware that we had several forums on the conversation of protest because I believe it was your son that participated as a youth voice. Which,
my grandson.
Excuse me, grandson. Apologies. because I keep trying to center youth voices. What has been determined around the investigations is that there was a separate external investigation, and the results, I think, will probably be coming out closer to June 1 or so. So we don't know officially, even though we know unofficially that some policies were probably violated. Now, unfortunately, we had interim police chief Mannheimer in place at the time, and also, unfortunately, she just kind of dismissed outright the Boogaloo Boys and white supremacy as a thing at all. And unfortunately, I believe, white folks have a tendency to do that. Oh, not us. And so what we are learning, because we have started having conversations about white supremacy with the police department, and we have since stood up an ad hoc committee focused on it. We are going hard at Chief Armstrong and his deputies and whomever else is there to, one, they recognize that there are still some very SWAT-like mentalities, folks that are kind of hoorahing and just, looking forward to the opportunity to engage somewhat viciously people, particularly of color, but within the protest. But I will also say that not unlike this recent protest, we have people still operating kind of, like Occupy, where they come from different cities to do damage to our city in the name of social justice. And they were doing that last year as well. One of our next meetings will be with the heads of all the different police associations, because we feel like they probably know who these folks are. And the social—
Some of them are police officers.
Oh, absolutely.
We've identified that in the last 20 years, for sure.
Absolutely. And part of the problem is that, we have gone out of our way to hire those that, at least historically, hire those that have been most militarized in their training so that they could continue to run amok on the most vulnerable populations. I will say that Chief Armstrong recognizes, and certainly as a Black man, it's hard not to see, or it's hard to unsee those efforts. And so he is working through his executive team to begin to root it out. Obviously, there are a lot of protections in place because some of these folks have been with the department for decades. But the other difference is, and I've been sitting on panels to hire and promote folks, is that you have to identify all the places that are vulnerable. It's in the recruitment, it's in how they're trained once they get in, it's in how they're mentored by leaders, whether that's been 2 years, 5 years, 10 or 20. And so we are at a slow walk in terms of being able to get that revealed, because obviously the speed of change is slow, and accountability is something that has not previously been a requirement. But I do believe that the chief and his executive team are absolutely committed to it.
All right, well, we're going to hold you to that.
We will learn more in June.
We're going to hold you to that with the chief. I am.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens. I tend to think the culture is such that there is nobody in uniform now that is going to move in the direction that needs to be moved in. And that's been somewhat—
I try to keep hope alive. And knowing that this is a different time, there are more people pushing for it, and you have the kind of leadership that recognizes it.
Pushing is the critical aspect of it, and,
yes.
and not hoping. I think, but we can all agree to fight hard.
Action. Yes.
I'm told that we're close to out of time, Regina. And it was wonderful having you here.
So much. Thank
Walter, you. I want to add, Regina, thank you so much. I wanted to add that there will be, as of October, 2 vacancies on the Oakland Police Commission. And I put in the chat earlier information on applying. If you have some interest, you're over 18 and also an Oakland resident, in applying to actually be on the commission. One of the appointments will be by the mayor, and the other appointment will be by the selection panel, which, as Regina mentioned, I serve on. So take a look at that. There'll be more information for the public, you know, in the weeks to come about that. But Regina, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Gay. And are there any other issues that here we need to discuss? Housekeeping? Lori, Jack.
Howard's got his hand up. He's waving at us.
Oh, I thought he was just
I
waving.
want to just mention, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, that the Oakland East Bay Democratic Club, thanks to Melody Davis, hopefully is going to have the chief of police at our May 8th meeting. So please join us on May 8th. We'll change the meeting date because of the state convention next weekend. But May 8th, hopefully we'll have the chief of police addressing us.
Okay, let's not do a love relationship with these folks, which is always a tendency right
We
now.
don't intend to. We're from East Oakland.
All right. All right. That's the way we have to go in order to make things happen. Thank you, Howard. Thanks everybody for coming, for being here, for doing more. Thanks for all those folks who put this together. Gay, with your sharp questions. All the folks who put things in place for us to make this a useful and informative meeting. I hope it worked out for people, and let's be in touch about the other actions. I think going to the meeting with the chief and holding his feet to the fire is going to be important for us, and joining with the other club and the other discussions that are happening.
I think Jack wanted to say something.
Just a quick announcement. You know, we do have an assembly district election coming up. So I just want to let everybody know we will have an endorsement meeting. So watch your email. We don't have a date yet set for that, but you know, it will be coming up pretty quick.
Oh, that's right. It's coming up. Have you determined who's running?
Yeah, there's like 5 candidates right now. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Wonderful meeting. I was glad I was able to join, representing my sister, Lanice Jones. Okay. Bye-bye.
Great to see you. Great to see you, Anita.
Thank you, Walter, for facilitating, and Sandra, both of you, and Gay too. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sure.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right.